Yeah, so I'm happy to be hosted by Antonia and Kashar. Um, in the sense that so much has happened. You can imagine if you've had a day or a year of experience, what it was like to actually be in this continuously for 17 years. Um, a single day in my brain is going to be an experience. You don't lose anything. Every experience holds just so much, and it could take years to process one experience. So there's a kind of art and science and mystery to how things gather, how things organize. So when I found not the inner dance, but the inner dance inside me, I was interested in many questions. I was interested in, for one, how do we organize a person? And then how do you organize an earth? This for me was not conceptual. I was interested in how does an eternity and an infinity come together. So there's something about the history of inner dance that actually mirrors the history of the earth. And depending on where it touches you, some people say, you get hit. I remember this Japanese American man who was describing this in Seattle, in the US, a long time ago. And he said, like, it hits you like a truck. That was how inner dance especially was in the early years, where there was something raw. There was something so, it hits you. So it actually took me a long time to not necessarily hit people. I found other ways, and that's my role. It's something that brings the slow to the fast. Something that allows you to see that which you can normally just hear. There's something about growing up that's taking place after the growing down. So when I first heard the voice, and I think it's important to say some of these words just to help organize the layers of what you bring here. When I listened to the voice, I was gifted with the answer to all my questions that everything is energy. Everything is the universe. That was the answer. So people now have workshops, people now have sessions. But prior to all of that, it was just simple. There was just this understanding that everything was vibrating, everything was energy. So that was me many years ago, before I learned how to speak language again and to be human again. I became an energy. I smelled energy. I saw everything as energy. And I would listen to people and say, they're using words. It's like, I'm trying to hold all of this. So energy inside me had to grow up. It had to become a person. It had to take care of my 2 kids. It had to worry about things in the world. So when I come to you now, it's with a lot of memories of what it meant, number one, to be a person and then to become an energy. That's one. And a lot of people are in that process right now, and it's interesting, it's powerful, it's relevant, it's needed. For me, that doesn't actually take that much work. For me, I've seen small children literally just go there. That doesn't actually require training. That's the easy part. The part that necessitates we fly to Paris we drive to Paris today is the other part. It's the becoming human of the energy. Like, how does that actually happen? That you don't compromise, you don't lose the purity of the energetic, that it can live here. It can, so now inner dance is in another phase where we are bringing this into the education system. This is now by contract, like something within the Department of Education in the Philippines. Now we are training doctors across the world. It's now part of the medical system. It's now being practiced inside jails. It's now in addiction centers. So my aim is to give you a language, a framework, so that when you are not going to be doing this in secret, not inside yoga spaces or contained spaces, when you bring this outside and you need to have a meeting with the Prime Minister, with the school principal, with the head of a hospital, like, what would you say? What would be your terms? What would be your frames of reference? And because there are so many options, how would you allow that to just be one? So that's partly what we are here for. It's to take that which is so good at disorganizing, messing things up, and then how do you organize the mess? There's so much interest in the world right now as to, okay, let's really get good at destroying, at deconstructing. Having said all that, when I was in energy and I was growing up, what happens is you become an earth. You literally become an earth. You become the collective consciousness. You become the species. And you become all of what's been stored in the species, and you start to think about things that have been thought about over and over and over again in cycles and rhythms. So then you would have all these questions. Okay, what is it about the unconscious, the mind? What is it about language? What is it about the body? What is it about the brain, the nervous system? Okay, so if you had 1 year just to think about this, what would you end up with? If you had 2 years, or 10 years, or what if you had 100 years? Or what if you had 1,000 years to live here in continuity? What would you end up with? So something inner dance does give is time. It does give you time. Not literal time, but vibratory time. And one of the first insights you receive is, I'm really old. I'm probably a lot older. For some, in the beginning, it comes as energy. For some people, it comes as emotions. Some people get it as sensations, and some people receive it as information. Sometimes one comes after the other in a sequence. Some people are able to hold all of it at the same time. So then there would be these basic literal questions. When the body moves like that, does it mean anything? Or am I making it up? Is it random? Is it communicating something? Is it receiving something? There are actual answers to that. And I get scared when people ask these because they want the answer in a statement or a paragraph. The inner dance, since the beginning, was studying the human. Like, literally, that was what was happening. People would go there, and then they would see these beings. Some of the beings were small. Some of the beings were big. And they were studying the human, every part, the eyes, the heart, the brain. And they were like, oh my God, they're doing it again. They're connecting. And as they connect, changes are happening. So you are studying the human. You are studying where the human came from. And even as you're studying the human, you're studying how the human is not going to stay human. It doesn't take that much to move from a bonobo or a chimpanzee to human. It doesn't take that much to move from human to whatever we're going to call the next experiment. And so if you're going to change your DNA, you're going to change your brain structure, you just have to be open that we are not going to look the same. Hello. You know, you're not going to look the same, you're not going to speak the same, you're not going to move the same. So let's look at time, the ever-present topic in inner dance that will never go away. It is the meta-philosophy. And, okay, when I talk about I became an energy and I had to go back to the world, and I channeled the earth and the growth of the earth and how I was growing with the earth. When I looked at all the structures that would bind especially spirituality and science together, I found the answers in French philosophy. So we're going to go into a philosophy course this weekend, French or non-French. I think it's interesting to reread. It could be from Descartes to Derrida. What would the world look like through inner dance lens? Borrowing some of the structures that were there in some of the deepest thought experiments that actually we bring continuity to. Because a lot of them became irrelevant at some point, but we actually need to understand what is it about the French anyway, or French speaking. There's something about it. I've been watching the French bodies, just like I've been watching the Polish bodies, the Japanese bodies, the American, the Australian bodies. I was that man with the inbox where I was receiving all these emails from France, from the UK. Okay, it's getting weirder, Pi. And I'm just there taking notes. I had the blessing to at least see the global pattern really early on. From Africa, from India. And there were interesting events where what used to happen to the Asian bodies, you know, their bodies used to move a lot and they didn't see anything. And then every time Westerners would come to the space, they would just be like, nothing was moving, and then they were just seeing the colors. And now the Asian bodies aren't moving anymore. And then I just watch these Western bodies. They're just doing, you know. So a wise man named Tu Wei-ming said, the past of Asia is the future of Europe. And the past of Europe is the future of Asia. What began in Africa. We're becoming each other. So understand the rare occasion where a brown man actually holds white space. I have been a voice helping to hold a structure that is sometimes strange, sometimes mystical, but actually holds a lot more structure than what people would expect. So we need to understand how is history, doing these motions. So I was born in Manila, just to give a short backdrop for people who don't know where I'm coming from. Manila has 24 million people. It's the 4th largest urban area in the world. And that's a lot of chaos. The Philippines is 110 million people. We get the most natural disasters every year, anywhere in the planet. So when you discover Kundalini or inner dance or whatever you might call it, that's my culture. I bring chaos. And when you have a people who keep getting destroyed and have to keep rebuilding again and again, and you're coming from a place that really doesn't like disorder, and we're having to get used to that, This energy holds flexibility, flow. So you're borrowing something from the earth in that way. You're borrowing something from the east and from the south that will help. I used to think that inner dance will help to decolonize the colonized, but I realized that it would actually help in decolonizing the colonizer. There's something about the history of the earth, and I'm not talking about east and west there. Like Jacques Derrida said, language is the first colonizer. And we will talk about some of the language things that are happening in the brain. Wait. This pen board is not so easy to use. Okay, so there could be directionalities. So depending on where you learn your inner dance or your life force energy process will define how you are actually experiencing a lot of this. My board doesn't want to stay open. Just do it from memory. You know, a lot of people are now interested in shamanism, in energy process. So they come to Bali, they come to the Philippines, they come to Thailand to let go. But what would happen when the other side comes here? Are we still waiting for that? That we don't just appropriate words from India, keep reusing that, bearing meaning in a way that's really expressive and really fast. So something that's happening now with me as just a mere symbol is we're going through an entry process. When people come to the East, one of the projects is to erase the history. Like, isn't that what we're doing? I'm tired of the story. I'm tired of the narrative, the sequence. I'm interested in the white page, the blank canvas. I'm interested in the white, in becoming pure. So when you're done with that project, and you have to really understand where I'm coming from here, like there was nothing. The first time I experienced this when I was living in the island alone on coconuts without other people there, I heard the words, "The mother and I are now one," and that's when this began to happen. And it was just alive. It's like, oh, okay, hi, hello. Okay, so it spread, and then the word said it began in Africa. And the sounds came through. I wasn't just singing it. It was codes. And then the strangest thing that ever happened to me in my whole life happened. Time stopped. Like I was the only organism anywhere that was in movement. Everywhere I looked, everything was like a photograph. The waters, the trees, nothing was moving. So then the energy kept building up, and time started to go in reverse. Like a lot of people were waiting, like, okay, Mayan calendar, 2012, the world is ending. So maybe there's something about the reversal of time. the going backwards of time, the becoming circular of linear time that can explain the way you're experiencing your days, that doesn't seem anymore how you used to experience like a week or a year vibrationally. There's a certain concept in post-colonial theory called Orientalism. Orientalism, in a way, is heavily influenced by the French. It began with the conquering of Egypt by Napoleon Bonaparte and having access to ancient knowledge, you know, the hieroglyphic literature. The West could suddenly have an awareness of the other side. So Orientalism, in a way, built the Western ego because they could have a comparative situation where, okay, this is me, and that's what's darker and mysterious and interesting and mystical. Okay? So for me, inner dance and the energy and Kundalini, it holds a kind of Orientalism now where the West is becoming the East. The West is becoming the East. The history of the East is becoming accessible to the West. But then now, when after the growth process, the opposite of the Orient is the Occident, there is an Occidentalism happening. And so when we bring the energy into the sciences and into the philosophies, not just the spiritual, we would need to go back to the books. We would need to like really detach in a way that we would see all these histories are actually just one story. And they combine, they you know, and it's not just for you. It's not just for your people, like the people who attend your work. This is most especially for the children. Because what would be a schooling system that teaches a child about everything? All at once, at the same time, without losing parts and parcels that holds the whole. What would be a meta philosophy, a meta theory that brings about always this meta experience? So that's why we need to speak to each other in a way that's fair and equal. And it took a long time for my side of the world to find its own voice. And so now when people are experiencing this, this is the voice. This is holding a lot of information. And so thank you for listening. Thank you for making the commitment to actually help to hold not just the thing at the left or the right, where we are going to be the space in between where there's no difference anymore. Then and only then, I think we can rebuild a new story. Because you can never really make something up from nothing. That's ego. That's just also fun. It's just the person coming here to play, to take up space. But were you to actually access yourself as a planet and not just as a person, you would need to go through a life review. Whether it be clear or not, to grow, to, like here maybe there is the becoming old. You know, we come back here to this side to become old. And then we come back here to the north or the west. So we could come of age. So we could grow old. And they're two very different processes. They're super separate, in fact, from each other. Because once the becoming old hits you, there are many things that would be invisible, that would not be clear. And so there would be this tendency to simplify, to want things easy, to want things fast, to want things really big all the time, and not really go through a maturation process. So often you would hear information and you're not processing it in the same way. You could be reading a book, you could be watching a movie or talking to a person, but somehow the way you're approaching history, and sometimes we like to say herstory, because why should it just be his? Like some of you are re-entering time after going into space. You're actually going back into time. Some are nodding. It's like you're going back to time. Okay, so let's go into the Prezi. I think it was just important to give this backdrop before going into the material. I'm feeling like maybe showing the one video where Kishar took part in. When Kishar ended up in Palawan, it was actually a very special moment because I had finished my first wave of teaching when I used to do what was called inner dance teachers or facilitators training. I said, I'm going to stop doing that because when you put those words there and people come with the expectation that I'm not against holding space, I'm not against facilitating or teaching, but there's something up with those words that need to be looked at. So I called it the energy school, to just clarify that the real teacher and facilitator is the energy, the student is the energy, the classroom is the energy.
My hands were dripping. It's like, it was so wet. Yeah, so my hands were just soaked and I was so hot, but inside I was so cold and I was shivering and I was shaking. The vision of reincarnation and what that is about, it's just correlation with water. We're all the same. I'm just not scared of death. When I was a kid, I would always look into the vast ocean and I would see the sky and the ocean. The waves are the clouds. The ocean is the sky. And everything for me is just the same. And then sometimes you get caught up in life and, reality here. And then moments like this, which is special, you get to reaffirm to yourself that it's just one beautiful thing. You have to go through the process, but it's all the same. And I was like, perfect.
I was just, then the mind was gone. I was just, at one point I was aware of how much I was crying. It was like suddenly I tuned in thinking, oh my God, I'm sobbing, but it wasn't me. It was just the body. It was just such a release. And it was like all these, I could almost see all the images of everything. And I had so many insights. It was so overwhelming. The insight was that a part of me was still there. It was still a part of my inner child was in this dark place. Like heart felt healed on a deep level. It was really, really powerful. And yeah, definitely a breakthrough.
When I lie down on the floor, then I had at the base of my spine there was like a thread, and it was white, and I could breathe it out, and it was very strong energy around the shoulder blades. Then I felt the energy in blue, and eventually it came up into my head, and I just really enjoyed it at that point. So really happy actually, and then I love it, and I said everything is good, and it's so nice, and it's so great to be here.
You always ask this question, like, why are you here? And now I know why I'm here. I'm here for letting go. And one thing that's really important for me is living from the heart and sharing, and in this inner dance I even like gave my heart like away, and it was like painful but also really super. I cannot understand, I cannot describe it. Like you're nothing, but then again you're not nothing. So it's, but you really like throw yourself on the ground to this higher energy. So this is really strong. This ego you have, you really throw it away, or it's more like giving away. But it's not pain, but it's a kind of pain. And afterwards you feel really free. So I'm actually now crying, but I feel really happy.
The movement is associated with your life experience, and suddenly I see flashes of my childhood. So now I realize that it's still there, all these things that I have suppressed. The flow started from the base, and I can literally see how it crawled all over my body all the way up. I can call that feeling eating a fruit salad while riding a roller coaster. Literally, I felt like I was about to burst, and the release was there. I cried a lot because I felt so happy. And this inner child, the voice of the inner child told me, now you're home. When you're home, you become natural, you become a child. You don't have to worry about what people think about you. You don't have to worry about how you move, how you act. I ask myself, who are you and why are you here? You are here to show people that we are all able to heal ourselves.
It felt like a baby dropped in a cloth. It felt so good. And it was the longest sleep, I think. It was so long. It felt like the whole night or even longer. And then I woke up, it was like...
It's probably my most intense session ever. The thing was my hands. Those are the things that I could see. And I'm always seeing in my memories, my hands. Shaking someone's hand, grabbing food. There was one point where I punched somebody. Like my hand was there all the time. Like my hand was like, it had a mind of its own. What are you doing, hands? grabbing chocolate and eating it, and just uncontrollably. Then it started going into a lot more positive things that I did with my hands. Holding hands with someone, carrying a baby. It was a real memory. I was like, a lot of stuff I forgot too. It's crazy. You know, it's like, oh yeah, that happened. I can see that. I need to be aware of my hands. I don't know. It was really eye-opening.
A strong vibration in my heart. I never felt such a vibration. Yeah, it was so powerful. I started vibrating very, very strongly. I even see the verse, and then I could feel all my cells. And when I was aware of the movement, sometimes I was thinking, oh, it's too strong, I want to stop that, and I couldn't, you know? At first, when I felt the energy flowing, I had the image and the feeling to be like a flower of life. The image of being in a most beautiful place of the universe, you know? I just felt that it was perfect. There is no other word. I also had the feeling to be in a wall, to be like an embryo, to feel so perfectly surrendering. Yeah, that's the word.
Okay, so that's really a historical document. I stopped making these videos after that year. So they're really just as a memory. So like that Asian female, she was the one who brought inner dance to Holland the first time. Kashar brought inner dance to France. That never ceases to amaze me how people like Italy would bring inner dance to Finland. How do you bring such a concept so long ago in a way that there was no understanding of this? That it wasn't contextualized. That was my life. I had to come back from my experience and actually explain to people that there is something. Right now, there is a romanticization of the movements, But it was never just the movements. It was, how do you understand what is earth? What is consciousness? When everything that ever happens for a reason. And the solutions are hiding in every problem. And everyone is bringing a message from the source, even those that you especially don't like. That was a consciousness. The body was just an experience of how we were seeing the world through the lens of oneness. So I think those stories are important, of what it was like to bring this energy flow in a way that it's now considered a thing. Now it's a thing. Now around the world, it's not actually so dangerous. You don't expose yourself to as much criticism as many of the first people who brought this here. It's like, where is that coming from? It's coming from nothing. It's coming from everything. And people had to put it into words. Now it's in ads, in images, in social media. And I'm actually happy about that in many ways. I'm happy that now this is safe. Now this holds context. And when you come here, it's because it has a history and a historicity, both of which are not the same. I've been waiting a long time to be able to do that one. I've always wanted to do that. Yay. Great. Okay, so this one's problematic, so I need to maybe okay, we're gonna go into the French process through this opening. We're interested in this. Like the ancients actually thought that this was the brain. Those were the Egyptians and the Greeks. They didn't know what this was. It's like cold, clammy, gooey. This is alive. So the ancients used to think that the heart was the brain. So in a way, many of you knew or know that they were right. This is thinking in many ways that this is not able to achieve. This is thinking through feeling. But then this is becoming important as well, because this holds organizing functions. And a lot of the inner dance processes, and now people have many names, the first intention was really always this. And the models, the experience, the frameworks were always languaged in a way that you need to shut down the thinking process. You need to stop thinking. And there's truth to that, because there is something that needs to shut down for this to turn on. And a lot of people really just discover how that works. Like, you know somehow there are ways to hold the context, to hold a space where people wouldn't get triggered into doubt, into skepticism. But that was not enough. I wasn't personally okay with that, because when it was just that, my problem was, even in the first years of the energy, I saw how much ego gets inflated. I saw how much addiction can arise when people just keep activating the body. I was in these rooms where I would travel to these countries, and I would see people year after year. They're crying the same drama. They're looping. They're feeling amazing. There's so much joy. There's so much electricity. But then when you talk to them about the problems, they actually started to accelerate and become bigger, and they had no solutions. They could solve it during the 1 hour or 2 hours that they would come in, but what about the rest of the week? So I decided early on I'm going to work in this project because people would need it. People would come later after they experience what I experienced. So I'm not judging. I looked at my own ego. I looked at my own addictions. And especially I looked at the concept of power. I saw how much power it gave me. And I saw how much I became a shaman and a mystic. And I saw what that did, that when I became the mystic, people were mystified. And then they lost power because they were giving me the power. And it wasn't balanced. So I decided really early on, this needs to be addressed. So when I left the world in 2017 to be quiet, to work in the project, in my silent retreat, that's actually when people started to take the energy and repeat the same project that I was in. And I was quiet. I was observing it. It's not ready. Wait, don't hurry. Slow down. It's not ready. The notes aren't complete. But then maybe that needs to happen, and I'm glad it happened. That's French philosophy. That's Michel Foucault. Power, knowledge. We want to understand what is a Foucauldian and post-Foucauldian approach to understanding, like Kundalini, inner dance or life force, and knowledge. I remember in 2018, this really amazing, funny, worst, ironic moment where I was making a wiki system for the process. And when I would put the entry for Kundalini, and they're close to each other, they're both K, every time I put the entry for Kundalini, the entry for knowledge would disappear. It was so interesting. And every time I would put entry into knowledge, Kundalini would disappear. I didn't know where it went. It just kept happening and it kept happening. I was just shaking my head, no way. Exactly. Every time you work just in the yellow, like this, the mind would stop thinking. And every time you start thinking, then this would stop. Is it actually possible to hold both? Is the question now, this year, these next years. And we have so much to experiment on, so many bodies experiencing a lot of power. Great, because we're disempowered. We need to find once again that I'm okay to be strong. But we need to find a definition of power that we'd be okay with. Because in my journey, it was when I let go that power came through, and it wasn't my power. You study the process. People lay down, they close their eyes. It's exactly to give away their power. It's like, okay, take over me. And then power comes through. So there would be this process of growth that would allow power to become insight, wisdom. So that's why we're interested in this as well. Like, I'm interested in the brain. I love the brain. I think this most complex thing that we know about is actually becoming simple to a person who's becoming energy, who's allowing electricity to flow through. So there are words that are not oft spoken about in the journeys. Like, what about genius? What about brilliance? And not just about like, oh, are you awakening? Are you able to use this super brain of yours now? You're accessing it for sure. But then would you actually start to use it in a way that's... Well, so every concept, when you're in that energy, every concept, every idea, and every tool, everything you pick up, you have to change your brain now. You literally have to reorganize your room. in order to, step by step from the ground up, build something new. Because a lot of you are experiencing, okay, I'm not a person anymore. I'm not the same person. So then, how do you rebuild? Where would you begin? You would actually need to rebuild with the rest of humanity. You would need to access the resources of the species. So this guy, I don't know if you know this guy, his name is Sigmund. We're still a little bit traumatized by him. He gave us the notion that this is something we can never know about, the unconscious. It's that part of the iceberg that's not the tip. We love him. He was interested in dreams. But he didn't give us a way to stabilize. And so a lot of people who still are accessing their Freudian energies, it's like, oh, it's mysterious, it's trauma, it's dark, it's the unknown. So it was the French psychoanalyst named Jacques Lacan who said the unconscious is actually structured like a language. This is important for people who are accessing light language, for people who are losing their language, for people who are not speaking the same way. If your language is changing, your unconscious is changing. So,
Sorry,
yes, Maria.
I am dyslexic and now understand my structure.
Yes.
There is no structure,
Mm.
but you understand everything.
Mm.
Sorry.
They're working together, yeah.
Yeah.
What was important in what Jacques did here was he brought two domains that are normally separate. Do you understand what I'm saying? When people study language, it's just language. When people study the mind, it's just the mind. But he was one of the first people who said you need to bring those together. And that was the birth of what's called structuralism. This inner dance is very much about post-structure, what comes after structure. But what we're interested in is there a structure? Any people who evolved, their critical thinking process became interested in what is language? When I'm saying these things, how am I making things up? What I find the most interesting about language is even as you speak the first word, the whole sentence is actually already finished. How are you doing that? Is there something inside you, like a small person writing the script and telling, okay, say that, and then after that, say that? You're doing that outside of time. And when you become interested in time and space, and when you become interested in how you're sequencing events, the reason why we achieved almost everything complex that we achieved, it is because of language. It's because now we bear internal representations of what is otherwise called baby. Babies didn't have language, they didn't have memory functions the way we do. Babies are always in the present moment. And I'm not against baby, I'm pro-baby. But in a way, if people are just going to become babies, what we saw in inner dance history throughout all this time is a lot of people just stop talking. It could be for hours, weeks, days, and I met people who stopped talking for years. Not a word. So, do you want to keep doing this? Do you want to keep doing this without understanding how certain language areas of the brain are in fact being triggered so that the inner dance or the kundalini would awaken? And I'm not against losing language, because when you do speak to these people who can't talk back to you, they actually know more. But it's not really useful to be making a marketing presentation or to be, whatever it is you do for your work, to lose your language completely and for eternity. So language actually does something for us that's really, it's indescribable how. So The person in the awakening process is studying this. And at some point, you become interested in what is a way that really connects, that communicates. I'm not going to talk about this guy, Roland Barthes. He's another French guy, but he is maybe the most known structuralist. Structuralism is something I stuck with. I studied structuralism because it helped my energy body. And it was not me. I was a human studying structuralism, looking at what did the French, the Germans, the other structuralist thinkers, the Russians not see in a way that maybe we have more access to. This is what structuralism looks like right now. In the cognitive sciences, now we're looking at all of these domains coming into one. It's the understanding that if you want to know more about the mind, you need to know more about the brain. You need to know more about language. Philosophy is where things are spiritual. It's not just Western philosophy, it's Eastern philosophy, it's Southern philosophy. We would not be able to speak to the schooling systems right now without having grown through these. So when you come to our space in Inner Dance now, there is an actual science. There are actual theories that we can back and substantiate. So it's very rare that I would speak about something that I cannot explain. I will not just utter statements that don't bear responsibility. A lot of time has been spent to know what is underneath everything that I would not share anything that I don't know. Okay, so here's the guy. Here's the Frenchman. What's his name? It's Descartes. Je pense, donc je suis. Cogito ergo sum. Why is he important? Why are we talking about him? The mind is not equal to the body. So when we understand philosophy, when we understand psychology, the mind and the body are separate projects. And it's because of that guy. It's because of that Frenchman. He traumatized us to say that the mind and the body are separate. It's called the problem, the mind-body problem. Do you see how you're contributing to the Cartesian question? So many people now are going back to the body. We're going back to the body. We're realizing that aspects of the mind, esprit, the spirit, is in the body. And you might meet people who would say, no, this is not relevant. It's all up there. So just end it. Get rid of it. You're not experiencing life through that, you know? And how did he arrive at je pense, donc je suis? It's exactly the opposite of this energy that you're holding, through skepticism, through doubt. Do you remember your philosophy class? He wasn't sure what was real anymore and what was not. Like he was dreaming and said, oh, that seemed real. And then this seemed real. So I'm doubting and I don't know what to trust. And the only thing I can trust is I am thinking. So you see how he really turned things around. He established that thought comes before spirit. And he said, don't trust the body. So the whole Western construct, because of that man, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. We are now a disembodied mind. How you're helping to heal consciousness is you're bringing embodiment back. So people say these terms now. What do we actually mean? Are you embodied? Are you integrated? Are you grounded? Are you landed? Or are you up there in the air, just conceptualizing? So we're not just healing ourselves, we're healing him. Okay, one of the things that he did say that I particularly like is he was the first man who said that the spiritual doorway of the brain is the pineal gland. He did say that. He said somehow, for some reason, because it's buried so deep in the brain, this is the spiritual doorway. In our processes, when you ask people to lay down and close their eyes, you will activate the pineal gland, and you will send out melatonin through the suprachiasmatic nucleus signaling system. There are other signaling systems, and I don't know how interested we are and how much we'll talk about it. But I just thought that rather than say he is responsible for dualism in the world right now, let's say he did have something to say that we can uncover. Is there anything more there? Okay. Because I'm going to be bringing up a lot of philosophers, I did at least need to find one woman. And I think she is the best. I actually know her. She was one of the last big students of the great Jacques Derrida. Her name is Catherine Malabou. She lives in London. She is the philosopher of neuroplasticity. She heals French thinking because she brings mind, spirit, body together in a seamless whole. And I haven't seen anyone do that in the way that she has been able to. When a man actually wrote the book on inner dance, she agreed to write the preface. So there is some understanding on how actual Western science and philosophy meets the energy that we're holding, and it's still in France that a full circle comes together. Catherine Malabou. Okay, so I think now we can go into really helping you to ground certain elements. I don't know why we're actually jumping into this, but let's just go ahead. So this is the body. When you look at it, it's just so complete. You don't see the parts. You don't see the things unraveling underneath. That's dynamic. Every time you touch one part of a person, you're going to alter that person. When you hold a person, something's going to change. That's actually made up of a whole bunch of somethings. Most easily, it has something to do with brain, breath, and blood. You will alter the heartbeat. You will alter electricity flow. You'll alter the breath. But more deeply, we're going to be talking a little bit about the chemistry as well. How are you altering dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, cortisol, oxytocin, acetylcholine? You don't need to walk away this weekend having a master awareness of all these, but even just me talking about it will direct you. Okay, there are aspects that are responsible for addiction. Oxytocin is responsible for trust. Epinephrine is, we could just keep going on. But before all that, it could just be as simple as when you touch the heartbeat, you will alter the process. So rhythm organizes time. That's a rhythm. That's a rhythm. And that's a heartbeat. So be very careful, because you're going to be touching people's hearts. And music is one of the most powerful ways to alter people's hearts. So the region of greatest pulse salience in music, for it to be recognizable as music, is 60 to 150 beats per minute. And I think it's amazing that the way they actually measure rhythm is how you measure heartbeat. The training could be so simplified as just to talk about this. You'll walk away with so much knowledge already. That a lot of people think that the heart is mechanical, but there is the SA node that holds the pacemaker. So your heartbeat has a clock. Be aware of that. Super simple fact. The heartbeat has a clock. And when you hold any vibration outside the body, you will influence that clock, that pacemaker. So you can take the smallest sounds, you will already alter, and a lot of people aren't feeling the alterations. They're not always obvious. So between 30 to 300 BPM, that's more the extreme scale. Okay, let me see if we can give an example. Okay, so this is 80 beats per minute. This is 240. This is 40. Now, in the beginning of inner dance process, everyone used the same songs. Kashar knows this. Everyone around the world, Antonia knows this. For one reason or another, everyone used the same songs. Everyone. In Switzerland, in Holland, in Singapore, in Kuala Lumpur, everyone used the same songs. There were maybe 30 to 60 songs. Everyone used the same songs. Because there was something in those musics that, when sequenced together, holds power. And this is before we were using DJ apps, and now synthesizers, noise machines, drum machines. Now, it took us a while to then realize that most of the songs were actually stuck within a certain rhythm, certain tempo, and a lot of those tempos were addictive. So a big practice in the process the last years has been to actually take rhythms and tempos beyond what is recognizable by the human. This is a choice. You, depending on how you hold the energy, you can take people into the personal, into the trauma, into the emotion. Okay, I need to talk to mama, dada. I need to keep going back to when I was 3 years old or 4 years old. Creating really subtle shifts allows you to then take them back even further. So some people say, I went back to the womb. I went back to the earth. So there's a lot more control now and a lot more insight that allows you to not have to fit your energy into a very small range. That you can in fact design the journey. You can bring more variety. Do you want to take them to the cosmos? What is the vibration? You want to take them back to the earth. What is the vibration? You want to take them into an emotion. What is the vibration? So most of the old songs were really good at allowing people to process their persons. And then when we realized that we were able to break the music, we were able to take them beyond just the person. So this is a big part of the experiment, the exploration, and that's why we are having to observe how, all these different domains kind of come together. given the space and possible time, I would love to go into the chemistry of change, the chemicals in the body, and how they're being regulated by the clock, by time. So like this is just one example that depending on a certain time of the day, stress hormone and the dream hormone are dancing with each other, sometimes in opposition, sometimes in complement. This is oversimplified. We can draw this out in more complex ways later. But this is, yes?
Is that the same for women and men?
That's a really good question, because what we're looking at is the circadian rhythm. And women have circadian rhythms, but you also have that which is beyond circadian, or men are like the sun. We come up, we go down. Women are like the moon. Depending on the time of the month, there's a rhythm that's 28 days, more or less. So endorphins, progesterone, gonadotropes, they have different rhythms as men would, because your cycles are not the same. Really good question. That's really a structuralism when we're not generalizing. So for example, one common example is when people say, okay, now that you know you can program a journey in a way that's holding more insight, okay, people get interested in, okay, what about addiction? Not just talking about energy addiction, but addiction to substances. Yeah, we could do it. But the question is, what kind of addiction? Because people are addicted to stimulants, they have a whole different rhythm as people who are addicted to depressants. So you need, why would you program the process in exactly the same way? So you learn to hold specific spaces for specific people. That's a lot more targeted rather than just, okay, everyone come and I'm just going to press play. And I'm going to try to talk to all the bodies at the same time. That has so much value. But if you want to do real therapy, these questions are important.
I think it's so ironic too when we talk about structuralism,
Mm.
because then you think birth control might help structure things when it
Mm.
actually does the opposite.
It would be a matter of going into like a ladder or hierarchy where what causes what, and just keep asking, okay, if that's causing that, what's causing that? And then what's causing that? Our proposal to the world would be vibration causes most of it. How people are vibrating the energy in their bodies and in their brains, their minds, that would cause the chemistry, that would cause the circuitry. So then you can find some kind of meta structure that would influence everything. That's where we want to go. What's the central governing system that handles the many parts? Complex as they may be, you do know that something simplifies at the end of the day when you do take people into the wave. Now, one early insight people received in inner dance was the law of contrast. There's something powerful in the way you change the vibration from high to low. And very often when you drop it, the energy, that's usually when some things happen. And then you raise it up again. So there is something about rhythmicity where the body and the mind, the person never is flatlined. We're never just there. There would be times of the day where we would. The shocking insight here is that based on the work we're doing, we're actually changing the patterns almost overnight, what took millions or hundreds of thousands of years to program inside people. Do you understand what I'm saying? This clock is old. This clock was needed for us to stabilize on Earth. But what's happening right now is you're changing the clock. We're changing the chemistry. We're changing the patterns. Okay, so if we're going to talk about the brain, let's maybe look for another French guy who contributes. This man is Paul Broca. He's a French neuroscientist, and what we owe to him is the fact that he helped us understand the contralateral qualities of the brain. He understood that language is here, and music is here. This is the Broca's area. Maybe let's look at that from this is my brain, this computer thing. It would be this part. So anyone who's ever experienced this thing they call light language, like light language, this is affected, and that's called Broca's area, named after the French doctor. Okay, so when you ask people to lay down and when you turn on the music, what are you doing? In the beginning, you're sending a lot of electricity surging throughout the brain. So you have two brains, right? You have the left and the right hemisphere. They're separate, and they're joined together by these nerve tracts, or bundle of axons called nerve fibers. So they're not separate. There are lines, and when you ask someone to lay down, when you touch them, when you expose them to music, it is known that musicians have a thicker corpus callosum than non-musicians. And I would suspect that if you probably study your brains who are experiencing energy, your corpus callosum is probably thicker. So it seems like when you send so much energy throughout these tracts, and there are different kinds, these could all be talked about. Like this one, for example, the arcuate fasciculus is responsible for allowing the Wernicke's area and the Broca's area to talk to each other. Okay, let me explain that. It's really quite interesting for you to understand this. There are people who go into the energy and they stop talking. The Broca's area is responsible for language production. And so when you send so much electricity through the hemispheres, and you begin to wipe out the old patterns, and people start to talk in light language, Broca's area is responsible for speech production, then people can't talk anymore. Because your personality, your trauma, your limitations, your fear, the way you sequence things is held in the Broca's area. The Wernicke's area is responsible for language comprehension. So I don't know if it's happened to you or others, but literally you would be you'd be there listening to someone talk and say, I don't understand what she's saying. They're saying these words. They're saying CAT. And I literally can't. When you send that much electricity through brains, you will affect language patterns. Language exists here. For most people, if you're right-handed, your language is here. If you're left-handed, you inverted it. It's here. Bless you. Yeah, Wernicke's area would be here. The only reason why it's important is every time you hear sound, this is what you activate. It's called the superior temporal gyrus. And that's where the auditory cortex is. Why would this be interesting for you to sit with for a long time? Here would be the gift. You don't need an EEG to know what part of the brain is lighting up. Just by watching, is there emotions? Are they seeing visions? Are they feeling sensations? Are their bodies moving? you could actually tell what part of the brain is lighting up. Is it the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, the occipital lobe, or the parietal lobe, or the emotional parts of the brain, the subcortical regions of the brain? So once you know how to activate the different parts, that which is responsible for visions, sensations, when people are dead set on, okay, I want to make that person move, and I feel that's not a good thing to keep saying in the trainings. You need to move. You need to keep moving, because a lot of the trainings would say, if you're not moving, you're blocked. Who's heard that? If you're not moving, maybe you're blocked. But movement normally happens only through the activation of this part of the brain, the frontal lobe. So basically, some of the deepest experiences we've ever seen are when people aren't moving. So that's when the energy is spread through the part that's actually journeying. You want to get people to journey. If you're stuck in the movement, you're not actually letting them ride the spaceship. They're not exploring. It's purely physical. So what we're offering you is, okay, complete the brain. Spread it throughout the whole thing. And every time you just keep poking, okay, poke, 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 poke. We used to call it the poking festival. You get so excited, okay, I'm going to poke that. Poke it, poke it, poke it. You know, it just keeps lighting up. You're actually blocking the energy. It's the opposite. The movement is beautiful. It's important. It's the gateway. But if you keep doing it too much, it's going to block the energy. It's going to be dopaminergic. And dopamine is responsible for addiction. So they'll feel good. But when you get hit by dopamine, you want more. You're never going to be satisfied. And that's great for making money. That's great for bringing in the people, but you're not actually helping. So I thought you were raising your hand. Dopamine, too much dopamine leads to psychosis. It also leads to the effect on these language areas of the brain, which is good. It's spiritual, you know. It's probably like if you lived in India a long time ago or an ashram, it's okay to lose your language. So Paul Broca had a really interesting patient. His name is Monsieur Le Bon. And basically he had this very interesting condition where anything that he wanted to say, he could only say it in one word. And the word was stan. He might say, okay, I'm hungry. I want to go to sleep. I don't like you. Or 1 + 1 = 2. His answer was always tan. That was it. That was all he could say. So his brain looped because he destroyed the Broca's area. So understanding that the work that we do actually deconstructs the Broca's area, when you start seeing people loop, overgeneralizing the same word again and again to explain everything, it's part of the work that we're doing. That's the opposite of structuralism. It's just becoming space. So we have words for it. You're becoming spacey. You're looping. Which I do feel is probably beneficial in some ways. So I want to take maybe a scene from a movie that's situated in the University of Paris. Because I want to talk about the key concept that we would really be interested in. And that's time. If you can keep asking certain questions, and you could choose what questions would never have boring, like detours or endings. Like, what is time? You can ask that to yourself. You can ask that to the people while they're laying down. Like, what is time? I want to take that concept and make it demonstrable. Love, could you get a yoga mat? How long have we been doing this? Again and again and again. Every moment has infinite colors, shapes, variations. Every moment is a universe. Every person, every day. Everything that you see, just one. Take a step back. See the whole field. What do we look like as we truly are? Spread even further out to the edges, the boundary. Now cross the edge. What bounds us? Just how old, how big, how deep.
So it was a lot of movement.
You can see that.
But at one point it was really powerful, like from here. I could feel something pulse inside. And was weird when I was on my stomach. Something was like, I don't know, I wanted to be a snake or something like. And then I had like orange, yellow pulsing as a heart, like really. And when you were talking about, I don't really remember, but I was like kind of, I wanted to be nothing.
Yeah.
But more I wanted to be nothing, more I was feeling something. So like very hard and something, a black ball. And I was like, no, I want to be nothing, but no. And then everything was super, I was going with the flow and everything was easy and I don't know, I was feeling so good. And at the end, I was like, nothing, only energy.
Yeah.
That was amazing. And that was funny to your questions.
Yeah. At the end of it, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Kailan kay Tillman ito na?
12. 1 hour.
Midi.
Midi.
Okay. I wanted to do that to ground a lot of the concepts that we're sharing in a way that it doesn't stay conceptual. What we have been seeing for a long time, but what we can demonstrate here in a compact way is, at least you're seeing what I'm doing, which gives you a structuralism. The sound holds structure, but in effect, sound actually deconstructs structure. Because unlike words that can really contain meaning, sound holds meaning, but not meaning as we normally understand meaning. So then when I can speak the language of, for example, rhythm, whether you might or might not understand what's happening when you see what happens when you speed things up and when you slow things down, how there's already a conversation. So one point is to stabilize and then to destabilize, to find where does it stay, where does it hold, but then where does it actually go to another space. So when I change the energy, you see something else, and your body holds something else. These are always unique settings because people are seeing you. So actually they're you, they're with you. Because otherwise if it was just you and me here, the energy would be different, completely. So you could feel everyone, and what you went through was what everyone was going through you. You are the part of all of us choosing you. We don't have to be you, you're already you, but we are all of us through you. So vibration would be your first language. That could have texture, tonality, and rhythm. Like the only thing I'm demonstrating to you right now is rhythm. That when you switch a rhythm, you're actually switching a dimension. So when you stabilize in a rhythm, you can get them to just stay there, and then they'll get stuck there. But there's something about allowing them to move into another dimension. Because when that movement happens, which is really what inner dance is, it's like being able to move across the dimensions. That's when you can hold more. Because one of our reasons for suffering is we got stuck in one dimension. We call that third dimension. So when you move from slow to fast, even the small differences will matter a lot. Normally I wouldn't do anything that compact. It would be an hour. A standard inner dance session is 90 minutes, not 60, because 90 minutes is a complete sleep cycle. And what we're mimicking is a sleep cycle. It's the stages of non-REM 1, 2, 3 going into REM state, which actually mirrors the cycle of the earth and the cycle of the cosmos. Whilst we're here anyway. So I want to see if any of you guys have any questions or ideas. As always, we love you because you provide.
I'm first, sorry, Pai. Yeah, for the first time I observed when you work, you speak.
Yes, of course.
This is anything new.
That's new to you. For me, I've always I don't actually need to use the music, but I need to bring the structuralism of the music so that people can have a starting point.
So to the way that you speak, the words they have vibration, they have a rhythm. So it's very mental this question, but for example, sometimes I speak with one people, sometimes I don't speak. This happens when I'm working, but I work in Bulgarian and work in Spanish. When I work in Spanish, I start to speak, but when I work in Bulgarian, I don't speak. For me, it's very strange. I don't know why this happened, but do you think that is good to allow to the person? Because you know that I'm teaching in Bulgarian. So do you think that it is good to mention that if anybody wants to speak, is allowed to speak?
Okay.
Because it's important to speak with the person when you are.
Okay. I only speak when I am being spoken through. If I'm speaking like I'm guiding, I will not speak, because I am then giving instructions and I'm influencing the space. But when I become her, then she is speaking to herself through me.
I understand. Okay.
That's the only time the words would come.
Yeah.
It's just like if I'm pushing the movements, then that's just me doing it. But when I am totally in connection, then she is touching herself through me. Otherwise, it's just me touching her, and then that's my identity influencing her. I think what we're practicing is that we can do this across the whole world, where when you speak only exactly when you're listening. Because when you're speaking and you're not listening, then it doesn't connect. It's not a real communication.
It's like you're in one. You are
Yes.
one.
Yes.
And only then you can speak full.
Yes. And touch.
And touch.
And hold. Because otherwise you are really just manipulating sometimes, or even influencing.
So when is this moment you really feel the connection? I mean, for you it's probably right now all the time, but
Yes.
what is the way to
Yes.
make this connection?
So our first entry point now is vibration. A lot of you have sensitivity. That when you walk into a room, you know the vibe. So when you know the energy of the language of energy, you know that for something to rise up, something needs to fall. It's paradox.
Yeah.
Something needs to go down for something to go up.
But I think it's the same like sublime energy, because everything what goes to create something
Yes.
sublime, you have to go down, and this
Yes.
interaction of the both forces, no?
So that's the general principle, and then when you study it in a more complex way, you would realize that there's actually an exact wave that exists in the human and in each person. Sometimes it might be too much. Like she didn't need that much going down in order for her to go up, because already she's done the work with those that she's working with. So you can see what I did. I actually had to slow down a lot of the body elements so that she could. Your mind was here though, which is great, because you could see through there. You could see but I slowed it down through what you are seeing now as a structure. There's a whole structure that's not always, it's never predefined, but the structure is there. And it's very accurate.
We can call it matriz, no?
The womb.
Matrices.
Yeah, well, that area,
Maybe.
yes.
Because she was all the time like this.
Yeah,
And then
yeah. But you know that it's very accurate when you hold yourself in that position where you are being held and you're holding at the same time. It's very precise. So another general principle in inner dance is what we're doing is, people say it's energy, it's vibration. It's not. Any vibration is a complex combination of many vibrations. That's why when you see people trying to meditate or trying to get stuck with one brain wave or oscillation, it doesn't actually do anything much, unless you do know how to expand the energy from that one vibration. But what we're learning here, because we're bringing this to the world, is what would be the journey that keeps adding more and more layers, whereas before people couldn't hold that much layers, because the training of becoming an adult is actually getting rid of the layers. So you can have language, you could have thoughts, you could have behavior, you could have personality. So now we're using the waves to learn how to dismantle, and there's an art. There's a whole sophisticated art that you are discovering. I know you're discovering of like mixing. It's like making soup. You put an onion there, you put some tomatoes there, because it needs to be like the perfect soup. So that soup is made up of vibrations and frequencies and amplitudes. So when we begin to bring more words or vocabularies to it, it starts to make sense to you. That which is otherwise just energy. Like me even just talking about, that could be interesting. And then we start to develop a vocabulary for holding the energy. We haven't really gone into it yet. We've gone into the philosophical underpinnings that would allow for a science to actually arise that belongs to the philosophical underpinnings. Are there other questions or observations?
I can just
Mm.
reflect Maria's, because I realized also in Finnish language I actually don't speak so much since the beginning.
Mm.
Then in English, yeah. So when and then so for me the interaction is a dialogue in the in the space between the bodies, and in my like in Finland we actually don't dialogue through words so much, because then if you do say the word it holds so much meaning. So in the process in the beginning there was not so much spoken words, but then when they come it can be a one word that holds so much meaning, but then in one point it changed to sounds, like something like or baby sounds or whatever, like baby language, light language, whatever we call it. So it feels like it's always intuitively, but whatever is the dialogue in that moment in the space. So when you do your trainings, not to say you should speak or you should not speak, but what is actually the dialogue in that moment with the body? It might be words, it might be sounds, it might be the touch. It's kind of all the same for me, but something it's interesting to look at the cultural structure of communication, because for me then in English, which is not my mother language, somehow it's easier to say or go into something that doesn't actually mean much. Go, you know. So we all have our, then when we do in our own countries, like what is actually the languaging in that moment intuitively that comes from the space, from that person, is it a group space? So it's just interesting to look at it, because there is a lot of differences.
But when you use like words, like rational words, like they are meaningful people, when I'm doing like, or like language is like not the rational mind who's gonna take something for the person who is blind. So I'm thinking like it is right to use like rational words, or is better to
it depends on the dimension or stage people are in and what you're holding. So the sounds that we make help with the deconstructing. Like it's a demolition job. It's destroying the patterns. But you know, sometimes you're with someone that you really trust and there's wisdom in the room and there's so much insight in the conversation where there's so many layers. It could be like 5 minutes or an hour, but you're actually holding global vision. So that's where language is able to hold the vibration. So there are languages that are very left-brained. The left-brain languages, like English, is very good at computation and sequencing things one at a time. The studied most right-brain languages in the world would be French, Chinese. Chinese is the most right-brained language in the world. It's those languages that you have to sing. It's tonal. A lot of European languages are very, very, very feminine, very right-brained. It's just through globalism, a lot of that through English. So what I notice is when people come into the inner dance, it's very right-brained. Like we were with Magali, who doesn't speak English. We're actually designing the process so she could develop an English brain. A lot of which helps her to sequence and organizes things that are usually very, very like French. Very artistic and creative and dancing around. So we want to develop both. So in the beginning, a lot of people will hold a lot of the music because that's how they can speak. When you're still neurologically creating a plasticity for your right brain, you won't actually be ready to speak in words. You have to wait. And when that develops enough, suddenly you're starting to speak more and more. Not as you, but the energy speaking through you. Now you're learning to sequence. Now you're learning to take all that was messy and super many and big, one at a time. And you can notice you're able to handle more information in a much more organized way. So you need to be aware of the stages that some people, you can't organize them yet. They need more space. They need more messiness. And then when that's messy enough, you can slowly start to help them to organize, and that's when the language structures would be really important. You had a...
I have like 4 questions that I keep
Okay.
writing down, but the first one was around the movement patterns. You mentioned before that back then, which I assume is like 2012 when the video was recorded to screen, there's like a diversity of movement, and then now you see there's like a
Yeah.
I don't know, solidifying of, or like patterns that are more grounded, and I wanted to hear what you think is behind that, or how you explain that.
Well, I taught some people. I gave trainings to some people. And because some people took it upon themselves to hold most of the energy, then a lot of that's being directed through a 1 or 2 or 3 or more persons that's now belonging to a line or to a lineage. So when you hear the stories that are being told, I got this from the mother. When I traveled the world, I was spoken to by the mother, and she said, we must become one. So when I came back to the world and I began to share space with other people, the story that was told was, no, this came from my master, who was a man, who lived somewhere in the world, who learned it from somewhere else. So the lineage was masculinized. And some of the people, I don't need to go into repetitions or loops around this because I'm tired of the stories. A lot of the traditions were very yellow chakra based. And I know that because I was in the room and I saw the questions that were being asked and the interests in all of it that was taking away the diversity, neurodiversity, linguistic diversity. But I'm not judging it because it's actually really powerful that it has that focus at this point that's coming from the 1 chakra, the yellow chakra. But to make room for the other colors, then even just these statements people keep saying, if you're not moving, you're blocked. Already that's a huge bias that's setting aside everyone who's not moving. They had barely been able to express themselves and where they went. Already they're being told, like, I'm blocked. You're not good enough. And I can't tell you how many people we've had to handle over the last 4 years who were told they were blocked and had to be told you're okay as you are.
And then another thing around the rhythms, so you were mentioning that when you start using a rhythm that is beyond what we recognize
Yes.
in the unit, then that allows, or how I understood it is, allows you to create experiences that are more planetary or cosmic.
Yes.
And I was wondering if first there needs to be a process of like going through the personal in order to reach the planetary, or if it's possible to directly.
So let's substantiate this. Normally the highest vibration that you can hold in your nervous system would be gamma state. But the only way you can hold gamma is actually to lower a part of your vibration to theta or delta. Something needs to be held slower and low for you to go higher. Now, a lot of people who are stuck in their stories or in their emotions or their thinking process, there's a lot of beta energies emanating, especially in the left hemisphere of the brain. And when people have that, that's when, like when people can't sleep, when they have insomnia, it's because they're still emanating a lot of the problem solving, worrying too much, over planning, because this is really good at sequencing things, but that's beta consciousness. So when you try to study rhythm, one of the reasons why you want to hold the super fast gamma, and there's faster than that, it's high oscillating frequencies, it's to take them beyond. But now okay, there's this art actually that so I showed you that scene from Lucy to help you understand that the faster the vibration, it gets to the point where there's nothing. You remember the thing with the car? So when you take a vibration and then you keep modulating it and then you keep adding frequencies, what happens is the frequencies keep adding up. It starts to look like a line, just like that scene in the movie. So when you take it so fast, it won't seem like a rhythm anymore. So what you want? What's the music right now that's got the fastest BPM? That's considered like still musical. It's psytrance. Psytrance has the highest BPM that stabilizes people in some kind of atmosphere or is considered music. So you go beyond that. Psytrance would be 140, 160 BPM would already be super high. Go up to 180, go up to 220. At one point they won't recognize it anymore. But it's still holding a rhythm. So it influences the brain and the nervous system to go higher. Normally you're able to go there actually every day, but you need to be sleeping. Because if you experience gamma while you're awake, that's called ADHD. That's called schizophrenia. That's called autism. Because it's so high. Your sensory overlays are absorbing so much information. So what we're trying to do is to help you hold a really low energy to help you hold a high. It's really just a mixture of vibrations that you can hold in any room. You walk there, I can experience all of it. I'm not going to get triggered because I'm holding the spectrum. So what we did was we limited the range or the spectrum so we could go to work. We that's what beta consciousness did. Yeah.
Last question.
Yeah, they're amazing. Thank you.
That I feel like I didn't grasp it fully. So I heard you say, we talked a lot about structuralism.
Yeah.
And I also heard you say that inner dance is actually going to post-structuralism. And as I understand it, structuralism is about, seeing the connection but also condensing.
Yeah.
And how I got it is that inner dance is also about creating more space. But I feel like there's something there that I just want more.
Inner dance, as many of us understood it in the past, was a post-structuralism, but now it's called a post-structuralism. What comes after what came after? So postmodernism and post-structuralism, if we're going to go into philosophy, would be when we were tired of the narrative of the story, the meta-narrative. Like the art, the music of postmodernism is very angry, very skeptical. I think post would be, are you done with that? Distrust. Are you still fighting? Are you still reacting? Or are we able to go back to the structure now with a lot more access? So we're trying to bring another understanding of inner dance. It's not just a deconstruction. That would be more of a reconstruction. So your question or our question would be, do you need to destroy just for you to recreate? It's a really big question. I don't have an answer. Because I've seen so many bodies, some people can just go straight there. But a lot of people, there's so much garbage. There's a lot of toxicity. And a lot of you belong to the West, so you know that it's not going to be like a switch, like go home, be happy. No, there has to be a process because the gunk is inside. So there has to be a process, like a wave.
So it's like meta-modernism, but meta-structuralism, for example.
Yeah, I think that's really what's happening here. Thank you.
Antonia?
You told about the high gamma state.
Yes.
Is it possible after an intensive energy training that you get more ADHD?
It's a really good question. We could, but we could redefine it as really just someone who's able to handle multiple tasks, multiple concepts. But on the way to you arriving at genius, it's very troublesome. It's very rocky. Like a lot of people will go into the process, they divorce, some quit their job, not some, but a lot of people, they go through all these. I mean, if they weren't happy anyway, then all well and good. So just going into the transition point, you want to be able to hold energies that aren't just going to keep destroying. Like what would be the point of stability that you could bring in? And when do you bring that in? So I do believe we are becoming ADHD people. And on the way to that, watching her, allowing electricity that got stuck to surge through the body. So one of the most studied sciences we've had to apply in inner dance is the science of epilepsy. Because we're going through, that's an epileptic seizure. Now, epileptic seizures in the ancient times were spiritual. It was sacred. But in the West, because people don't like losing control, then epilepsy is not a good thing. So after you go through enough seizures, it's called synchronization of brainwave activity that's usually desynchronized. Do you get that? For you to be normal, you actually need to desynchronize your activity. So when you synchronize it, it gets weird. So you're looking for what's a safe context where I can do that in a way that doesn't look so harmful. So you need, if people are going to be doing trainings, you need a way to get them from energy and back into the world. What would be a map? What would be a labyrinth that's partly philosophical, because they'll be asking questions about, what am I doing here? Like, what is all this? So developmental stages, like growing up, from being a baby. Like literally we can keep talking about how neurologically you're becoming a baby when you go into that process. Because we keep saying this again and again. The baby has 100 billion neurons. The adult has 50 billion. I'll say it again. The baby has 100 billion. So for you to become old, you had to get rid of the connections. So what does it mean that you're actually becoming a baby and you're having closer to 100 billion neurons again? You would have to prune a lot of those connections away again so that you can go back to somewhere in between, maybe 70 or 80 billion. You can't handle 100 billion. You'll be crawling in the ground, not knowing how you say gaga goo goo. You need, if you're okay with that, then stick to the basic process. But my advice to people is don't just keep doing basic trainings. If you just keep, basic workshops. If you keep doing basic workshops beyond 2 years or 3 years, you're going to lose it. You're going to get stuck in your baby state. You want to be able to create the structure, because when people experience, they have questions. And if your modicum would be, no, shut off your thinking process.
Do you think if we had stronger neuroplasticity, we could connect?
Yeah.
100?
I like to think that we can grow into structure by being able to hold complexity. And I think that meets that at a certain point. But because the human brain is accessing maybe an average 10% of its capacity, we would need greater capacity. And this is a way to hold that. But from my experience, it took me maybe 15 years to get to a point where, okay, I'm good now. I'm trying to find a way to shorten that it would take like 2 years or 3 years. And we're working with a lot of young people, studying their own process, their brain patterns, to know what are the stages of development from a child to an adult, and here from adult to child and back to adult, which are similar and super different. For those who have kids right now, I think you're lucky. If you have like those really small ones that are right at the edge of language production, it's actually one of the best schools for learning how to hold the process. I have 2 of them. Other questions?
I have a question about structuralism.
Yes.
And how it can also mirror with music. Because in the history of music, there was also like a whole deconstruction of harmony. And
Exactly.
regarding the rhythm and regarding also the harmony in terms of melodies. And you talk about rhythm in terms of slow rhythm or fast rhythm, but there's also like the regularity of the rhythm that would create harmony. So I'm curious about how you integrate it. Also because some studies, like for some of the deconstructed music, if you put it with plants, for instance, you see that the plants are dying. And some music which has a lot of harmony, it's sustained in the biorhythm. So I'm interested into this part.
Okay, I think it's an amazing question and one of the most important questions. I'm slow with that question because in the current structuralism, which is called cognitive science, where anthropology, the study of culture, linguistics, the study of language, neurology, the study of the brain, psychology, the study of the mind, philosophy, the study of spirit, AI is a study of how information is networked. These are all going to help us have a cohesive understanding of consciousness, but it's missing what we're doing. I think the spiritual awakening needs to lend to that map. Number two, music cognition and science of entrainment is so new that when you look at the notes, people know that music affects the person, but a lot of the scientists aren't actually arriving at real radical theories because their experiments are too conservative. So based on the work that we've been doing for years, that has actually been a laboratory. We actually know more than many, many scientists that are experts in sleep, psychology, in music cognition, because we really push the body over the edge. So there's a lot that we know, but there's actually so much that we don't know. And we can contribute to that in the next years if you're able to hold your sessions in a really amazing, wise, contained way. So I'm slow. I have a lot of notes, but I can't bring it up now because it would take me, even talking about rhythm, it would take me like days to even, I'm opening up doorways inside you so that you might be interested. You might look for more information, you just experiment. Okay, what happens if I change the rhythm? If I make the rhythm stay? Or if I even hold 2 or 3 rhythms? Like the West African rhythms is polyrhythmic. So what happens if I, because it's Western music that's really stable. That whole 4/4 signature, the meter, allowed for complexity because you could simplify. You could put things on top of it. But you go to India, you study the raga system. You go to Africa, you go to Bali, the gamelan system. It's so complex, like in a certain way. So don't keep using Western music in the process. Learn to let them go to Egypt, go to Africa without riding an airplane. And then what if you mix Egypt with Poland? What if you mix all these histories together? What is that going to do to people's brains? They become the earth. And then go way beyond. Just start using noise. Start using frog singing, and that's what a lot of people are doing now. Anyhow. Thank you. Other questions? Questions?
Yeah. I saw that you start the session with the feet and before you started with the head. Is there any meaning or did you feel?
Yes, there are explanations for that. So the part of the brain that holds memory is called the hippocampus, and it's connected to this part called the entorhinal cortex. That's responsible for memory. Now, the reason why you're able to remember is having to do with place. The explanation is actually quite good, and it will empower you. When your eyes are open, you know where you are. You're here, somewhere in Paris. When you close your eyes, you know less where you are, right? So memory has something to do with location. It also has something to do with locating yourself amidst all the other locations that you know. So when you have someone close their eyes, and then they're there, I like to touch the feet. Because when your eyes are open, your mind's here. And when I ask them to lay down, their mind starts to go there. And then when I go even further, then their mind extends. So what you're doing is you're dislocating location. Ego is located. It's like, I'm here, I'm just here, I'm embarrassed. You want them to go somewhere else, you have to reshape the brain. You want to be creative. Okay, what can I do so that I can extend the super limited perspective? So when I touch the feet, it's normally to dislocate consciousness. Okay, so there are these positions, these anatomical positions. Like big learning, when you touch the right side of the body, you're talking to the left side of the brain. So most facilitators, if you really want to extend consciousness, this does not need work. If the person is right-handed, that means that daddy, the masculine, the sequential thinking process is here. So if you want to open it up, send the messages through here. The signal mechanisms for time is in the right side of the body. So when I touch her on this side or anyone else, it's because I want her to go into space. But if I want to activate, so there's the right side, the left side, there's the above, there's the lower. It's a lot, but yeah, the more we talk about it, you'll be able to pick up some tools.
Yeah.
First.
You told about people that are having addictions, like drugs.
Yes.
Is it possible that you can touch the person at different places to heal them from their addictions?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah. Okay, let's get into this, but let's put time into it because it's a serious question. So dopamine would be the most obvious drug of choice for addiction. Epinephrine is adrenaline as well. It gets you high. Norepinephrine would be adrenaline in the brain. So dopamine is the drug internally that's used for anticipation. A lot of people think dopamine is supposed to be for getting happy. No, it's just for wanting to be happy. So social media earned the most money in the world probably for the dopamine validation loop, that every time you get a like, you get a hit. You get a like, you get a hit.
Yeah.
So you keep posting so you get a like, and then you get a hit. So music will hit people in the dopaminergic structure. You use music, you will route dopamine. So one major technique that you want to learn is how to build anticipation and then break it. Slowly you build the music, and then they're getting excited, and then you break it. When you shock them, that's when dopamine actually leaves the addiction centers in the brain. Normally to do with emotion, memory, motor functions, and attention. It goes into the other parts of the brain. It just explodes everything. So that's one of the reasons why it kept changing the rhythm. Rather than, okay, building up, I would take it off at the weird time. Because when people don't know what to expect anymore, you actually get to use dopamine in really functional ways, not just addictive ways. And then you access the chemicals that dopamine normally inhibits. The happiness drugs would be endorphins and serotonin. Serotonin would be the drug where, okay, I'm okay right now, I don't need anything anymore. But when dopamine is on, serotonin is off. So what you need to do is, even whether it's in a sequence, like one at a time, okay, fast, and then slow, fast, slow, strong, soft. The techniques that we're trying to study now is, why can't you hold them at the same time? So even if you're going to bring strong, whether you're going to make your own music or you're going to choose or shop for music that's going to work for you, look for something that's holding something strong but holds something really soft, so that even when they're anticipating, they're still journeying, they're still like seeing. And we've been studying this more and more. We have a really cool program in Cape Town in Africa for an addiction center. It's maybe the most talked about right now in inner dance, where people were addicted to this thing called tuk. I think it's like methamphetamine. They're bringing inner dance there, and people are loving it. But people are not doing any of this. They're literally just sleeping. And then when they wake up, they're like, I went somewhere and I haven't slept for so long. So what it's giving them is the delta theta energies that normally comes in slow wave sleep or entry stage sleep. So they're not going into REM state because of the drug, and they're constantly in this wanting to go high. So if you know that people are addicted and are experiencing too much of the high, whether bodies are moving or not, just keep providing them with super low, like drones, base, like like take them rooted in the earth, like really deep, super earthy. Yeah.
I have a question. In one case that I had with one girl before 2 days, she had an accident and all left side working good, but all right side doesn't work. This means that she can't speak.
Yeah.
And when I work with this part, I feel a lot of electricity, but not magnetism. Do you think that this have to do anything with the blockage that in the left side of the brain?
She could have a damage there. There could be a lesion there. So, like what we try to do is to neuroplasticity works in a way that sometimes it's actually harder to fix old connections. So it's pretty much like go ahead and get rid of the old connections that aren't working and then build new connections. So when you work with people who have paralysis, Parkinson's, what you want to have is stamina so that you don't promise that, okay, one session, I hope something happens. Try to make them commit to at least several times a week. Have them lay down, build them soundscapes so that they can do it on their own. Because neuroplasticity to heal really bad lesion damage would take at least months or years.
Yeah, I understand. Maybe 3 years ago. I didn't use music because I didn't know what kind of music I have to use. I only listen to the body, what the body is.
The most effective ones that we would use right now would be sleep playlists. It's to build inner dance playlists, 3 hours long, and then play to them while they're sleeping.
They can do it by themselves. So share the playlist when they go to sleep. They push play and then they sleep with the playlist, and the results has been like.
It's a lot more effective than actually while they're awake.
And which gamma have to go do the playlist? Maybe delta or theta? And which
It would be a lot more delta with snippets of spikes. You would design some of the rising, but you need to hide it so that you're still holding them down in deep sleep mode. What you're doing is you're lengthening the REM state experience where healing normally happens. So this is what we're bringing to the doctors now. Like the entry point for this energy process is understanding the wave actually works even while people are sleeping. And so there could be so much more habitus, like repetition, because people are busy. Why not do the work while you're sleeping? You're sleeping all the time anyway. You're actually healing. You're actually, and people love it. The effects are so much more than the workshops themselves. It's weird. I don't know why it took us so long to figure it out. But and only last year we did it, and then the kids and the old people, they're blown away. The doctors are beginning to give it to their patients. It's amazing at managing pain, emotions. There's this doctor from Germany who asked for a playlist, and we were busy. I made her one really quick. Her mother had a brain tumor, and then it got smaller and smaller, and poof, it's gone. So it's amazing what's already there. It was just needing the right stimulation, this vibratory nature, to say you're much more than. So the people are tired. If they're stressed out, they're not getting that support. So what you're giving them is vibratory support.
Have you looked at, and I don't know if scans can pick up on this, but have you looked at where the blood is going in the brain when these are happening?
No, we haven't even had time to look at that. We've only.
And then also, there's been studies that have come out about levels of CO2 in the blood and those helping to
What we're mainly interested in, and we can go into it if you guys are interested in, if your questions are already there, the part of the brain that manages the other parts, what would be the central governing body? So we found out that there's one part of the brain, and technically it's not even a part because it's glandular in nature. It's called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus manages the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the thyroid gland, the thymus gland, the adrenal gland, the reproductive glands. It's all the chakras. There's one, you remember Lord of the Rings? Remember, there's one ring that ruled them all. We're finding out the hypothalamus is that, and when you use this kind of work, you activate the hypothalamus. So that means all you need to talk to is the one brain part, and you can actually regulate and manage all the other brain parts and the rest of the body. So not just blood, it would be the chemicals. So why we're not so much into just the yellow chakra, like energy processes, a lot of what's being activated there is epinephrine or adrenaline and cortisol, which has powers, but if you can't balance that with what's called GABA, GABA slows things down. Here's my main problem with just dopamine. It's not actually just addiction. Dopamine, when it's turned on, will inhibit I don't need to name them, but they will be the chemicals that allow you to learn. It's called like what protects the synaptic connections is called myelin. It's what makes the brain underneath the gray white. And when you receive too much energy, you're not myelinating the synapses. When it's too much dopamine, you're not myelinating. If it's too much energy, you're not myelinating. That's why people are not able to hold on to information. You talk to them, people are stuck sometimes when it's too much energy. Too much dopamine inhibits that. It's a complex explanation. It has something to do with prolactin. Women know this. That's what allows you to secrete breast milk when you have children. Men have prolactin. Prolactin actually becomes oligodendrocytes that becomes myelin. And when there's too much dopamine, we become stupid because you're not allowing myelination to happen. So that's when you really need the slow waves underneath, because it's the slow waves that allow for myelination to happen. So you do want to activate, but you really want to slow at the same time. Does that make sense to you? Dopamine really cancels out like a lot. Yeah. No, you were the one.
Thank you. Yes, just to say that I have many times the question in the workshop or trainings, like how often do we need to experience the energy, you know, to journey? I am more than like going to the slow parts, so I recommend them like all the time that, most of the time that, because I've been experiencing it like this since the beginning.
I think you can do it as many times as you want, as long as it's going to be balanced. And as long as, I think what we need to be careful with, and I want to apply this for doctors, if you don't understand what's happening to you, you can only heal so much. Plasticity and learning happens when you're growing in the information. So the more you're learning, even as you're experiencing, then it's okay. In the world, you were one of the first people to try out the sleeping playlists. And you were doing it like almost every day. So that's not even a question of like how much is too much, because it was helping you. So I think for would-be trainers out there, you need to hold a school. What you need, or people who are learning, you want to be part of a school. And you want to be careful about the people you're around, because the kind of terms that they use would either like deconstruct or help to structure. Is it looping again and again? Is it the same concepts, same emotions, or are you actually growing as a community that's holding information?
Is it important to have an individual customized playlist every night? Like, is it important to not listen to the same soundtrack every night?
The more variation allows the brain to establish different connections. Firing patterns, every time you fire patterns like in a similar directionality, that's called spike time dependent plasticity, you will wire them together. And when you wire them together, you would have learned something. But if what you want to do is learn many things, you know, like a child can learn languages. multiple languages just do exposure, and then we can't do that anymore because our brains are kind of hardwired already. So now we're learning to unwire. So there's some wisdom in getting exposed to a variety. But I do know some people, they get stuck in one playlist for 3 years because there was something there. I haven't studied why that is. It's not that many people in the world. So customization is something we're only learning to come into now. So we are in conversations with doctor, and would there be a sound for a kind of cancer, for diabetes? We have some basic differentiation coming out now, but we've only gone into music production and are working with other music producers, along with brain scientists, along with teachers, along with doctors, to see what have we learned from all this and how do we bring this now to hospitals and schools.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any benefit to the familiarity of things. Like I get the benefit to reducing the dopamine and controlling the dopamine with the spike.
Well, we tell people stop using the same songs in the sessions.
Yeah.
Because you know, like when you observe people, okay, there's a sad song coming out now, I'm gonna cry now. There's a strong song coming. Okay, I know that one. They learn to anticipate. That's how dopamine works. Okay, I can feel it. You know, she's gonna make me sad again.
Yeah, I get that. I was wondering if there's any benefit, like when you're sleeping, to the relaxation aspect of familiarity. Like obviously we know now, cold showers, whatever, like discomfort is good, but is there
the sleep playlists are really wild. But that's only coming from me because I'm not conservative. Based on what I've seen, and based on what I understand, the more variations there are, my playlists sound really noisy.
The sleep playlists are not exactly like a relaxing meditation music. It's a very different category how the inner dance playlist is created with the kind of range that it holds. So it's not exactly like, oh, white noise, let's put you to sleep. It actually holds the range, so it puts you more early to the REM state, not just for relaxation. We're not trying to get them to relax exactly. Going to sleep.
I guess what I'm wondering is like when you're learning a language, there's a lot of merit in reinforcing things. So if there's a merit in this, and that in some element of consistency.
It's going to be a little bit different because how the brain works is when you have a particular rhythm, let's say that's a rhythm, and at the same time, I can't do it, but let's say there's another rhythm there. What your brain does is it's going to combine those signals. That's called cross-frequency coupling, and it's going to average them out so that you'll have another kind of wave that's in the middle of both waves. So when you expose people to more variation, like if anyone knows the science of heart rate variability, like the greater the variability, the better, because that means that there's a dynamic relationship between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, which means you are the kind of person who doesn't react to problems in a way that's super emotional or you know, based in stress. You're able to manage things with greater flexibility. So when you teach people to hold more potential or more variability, then people will be more open. And trusting that the brain would anyway average them out. If in the beginning you are talking rhythm and frequency, your brain always looks for the middle space. So when you create greater distance between slow and fast, the brain would hold a greater synthesis. You see what I mean? But if you're holding a very small range, that's usually an emotional trigger. And some people, I'm going to speak this to any of you in any community that got used to a specific style. When you change the style, some people won't like it. It won't always be accepted, but once they get used to it, they won't like the old system because their brain would have shifted already. So you need to be brave. If you are going to introduce something new, so there are many communities now, it's because they complain, I feel like you're manipulating me. I feel like you're just controlling me like I'm some kind of, and then when they shifted, they're like, okay, you're not giving me any ego space anymore to latch onto. it's all pretty much like wide open field, outer space, inner space. Yeah.
Maybe for like an example for the repetition, because I'm using I have endometriosis and like before, I don't know even the diagnosis. But since 13, I'm now 40 soon. So then when I stop painkillers, I start using playlists just to reflect if it's good to repeat something. So when I use, it's actually what I'm repeating myself. I'm using every time for the pain, when the vomiting or diarrhea and the extreme pain starts. What I'm repeating is that I'm allowing myself and my body to go into inner dance process. So I'm using different playlists, but what I am repeating, which is helping in that moment, is to remind my system to go off from the beta consciousness or the thinking and the pain avoidance loop, and that I'm already thinking that the pain is coming. And then I'm allowing my nervous system to relax and activate at the same time. So I am repeating what happens actually in the inner dance process. So in that moment, for me, it doesn't matter what playlist I use, because I have a remembrance in my body of the process, because I've been going into it. So I'm repeating, allowing myself to go into the process. So it's not any more particular type of sound or playlist. Sometimes I just use the noise app. I put any sound, but it's like a reminder for my body, okay, I can go, and usually I just drop down into this very deep sleep, or not even sleep, but in somewhere else. When I wake up, I'm painless. And it can take like one or 2 hours. And before, all my life, this was not possible with medicine or with other things, because I was too conscious. So I am repeating something there, and then I'm also teaching myself not to need even the playlist, to just go into the remembrance of the process where I'm able to access the root cause or the situation of my thing. So that, for myself, I cannot go so detail of what sound should be repeated, because it works anyways, but I am repeating the remembrance for my system to be in that allowance of the process, and it works. So like, yeah.
And I guess your hippocampus,
Hypothalamus.
and then it becomes more automatic. And then
I'm basically, what I feel myself, that I'm teaching myself a new way to handle the situation, because it gets really intense. Before now I might be painless sometimes, because it's already integrated already, and of course it affects what I eat, am I stressed, what's happening, but the playlist has been super helpful. But it can be in one moment any sound, and then it actually goes into that. So, but I'm just researching. I actually don't have answers either. What's the thing that is? But I've explored it for 8 years, and it's it's really interesting just to use ourselves as laboratory, because everything this is quite new. Like how the science starts to explain these things, no one can exactly tell this is. Because we are all very different, so we all of us will react very differently to different playlists and sounds. So there cannot be totally universal truth that only this sound will help your menstruation pain, because your whole system is created in a different way than mine. So there's so many conditions, and how we are structured, that also influences.
It's so interesting, because we take you take a benzo, and then you build up tolerance to it, and you have to take more and more and more. And it's the opposite. You're building up not a tolerance, but you're building up a muscle to be sustaining on its own. It's crazy.
Sorry, before.
I think this is super interesting. I wonder, in order for the playlist to work, is it required to have like an experience of inner dance with a person there, so your body can go into remembrance and activation?
A lot of people using sleep playlists, they don't even know the words inner dance.
Okay.
A lot of them would be parents giving it to their children, or actual people who are just receiving the playlist because they heard from someone it was working. So let's look at this structurally. So what's a loop, right? So this is looping. and you can just either shorten the distances between the stimulations. Every single one of those would create a firing pattern in your neurons. So the more a person hears it, you start to create a pulse perception. Then they stabilize. So let's say I changed it again now. Something a little bit. So even when I changed it, you have the memory of the old one. Something actually stays. There's a residue of the old one. So there are these techniques that you might learn where you need to put it back because they're not settled. And then once you leave it there, then they start to enter whatever that dimension is going to be. So let's say you just keep speeding it up, and you keep speeding it up. That's still a loop. So we can talk about, okay, a one playlist is a one rhythm, and then you keep doing it again. But when you create these micro loops already, what happens is the mind can go into a place where, okay, I've gone through that, I'm going in circles, I'm going through that again and again and again. There's actually something in the brain that allows them to keep reliving that pattern. Relearning the lesson, if you're holding the slowness deep enough at the same time where, okay, I'm tired. So that would be the point where they don't hear the rhythm anymore. They've broken through. So there is a wisdom in repetition, like you said. But because I'm more interested in dimensionality. That's really my project. I really am interested in other dimensions. So let me give an example. When people in the sessions, the journeys, they say I don't remember anything. I just slept, or nothing happened to me. But then the more you talk to them, no, wait, I was somewhere. But for them, like nothing is nothing, but sometimes nothing is actually everything. Very often that's the dimension already. So a lot of the new playlists that are breaking through are taking people there. And you want to be able to recognize that. Very often the people who have the least to share actually went through the most. So learn to really take it slow. If you are going to take people into the dream state, or maybe the consciousness is there when people are sleeping. What if you woke up while you were sleeping but you were still sleeping? What would you see? It would be that dimension. So slowly there are minds and brains that are acclimatizing to these other places. There are places more or less where a minute is not a minute. It's like a year or a week or a month. And the music would hold that in many ways. And when people ground themselves, it would just be they're able to handle more because they're now coming from there. Okay, I'm feeling any more questions so far?
Lunch.
Yeah, it's time. So at least we use this morning to more or less feel into where you guys are at. We're going to go into a whole bunch of experiences, but we do want to make use of our dialogue time. We can see that a lot of you are well on your way to advanced study areas, and your questions are really good. So maybe we'll just even radically alter the Prezi and bring more content.
Yeah, maybe practicalities of lunch systems.
So it's 1:10, so we give 1 hour. So 60 minutes, so 2:10 perhaps. If you have bought your own lunch, there's a little courtyard here, or you have the Quai of the Seine, which are accessible, where you can go if it's sunny. Otherwise, you have some bakeries around, or some places where you can buy.
Which direction are there places to buy food?
So if you want to go to the river, the river is when you exit left way, this direction. And the food would be more this direction, like on the street here. you have some bakeries or some.
In the back.
It's like
Here? Okay.
food.
Okay. And then we bought some, we have some fruits and snacks.
Yeah,
later
this
or-
was more for the breaks because this is not a
Okay,
lunch, but
yeah.
I have put some fruits downstairs already.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think it's good during the break.
Yeah. It's good to get some fresh air.
Yeah. And if you take the glasses of water, don't forget to put your name on it so that you can recognize it.
You have a smoothie bottle.
Yeah.
Do you think we will have breaks during the afternoon or morning sessions?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I put them downstairs anywhere, and when people are taking their own break.
I think we could have one because it's 2 to 6:30. It's a long, so we could have a small break.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I agree.
Maybe like a snack break.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, you have your own smoothie that Michelle brought to you.
For the discussion.
I
will drink them.
You stay here, you go outside?
I think how you want to go outside.
Actually, you
I need to work in the speaker system.
Yeah.
I need to stay.
You need to stay.
Have a smoothie here. I'll just have a walk after.
Yeah, you can have the smoothie on the sand. I'm also going.
No, I mean we can have a smoothie here because we.
Okay. Do you need help?
There won't be people who enter the studio except the people who have the course. Well, I don't think anybody will steal
I'll be here.
We need to prepare.
I'm gonna be here. Yeah, I need to fix the speaker.
We bring you the smoothie.
You will use the smoothie so that you can focus.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I can go get some coffee. What's a coffee?
Just a bit, yeah, not too much. I'm okay right now. I want to be settled in terms of the sound. It wasn't so good.
Why don't we just